Your TuneIn Music News Update. New Weekly magazine says Katy Perry and Orlando Bloom are considering getting married in Egypt because they enjoyed their vacation there so much. Speaking of weddings, naughty gossip claims Jennifer Lopez is allegedly trying to get someone to pay for her wedding. A source tells the website there's no way she is paying for that wedding and even less chance of her wasting one of the biggest press days of her life without harnessing it to help her business. To hear music from Katy Perry and Jennifer Lopez, search today's hits on TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Let's get you caught up on market action. Right now, it's a mixed picture. We've got the S&P 500 holding on to a very slim gain after a record high yesterday, although the Dow weaker by about 1/10% after yesterday's record close. NASDAQ Composite, meantime, on the back foot here. We're down about 1/10%. Many in the tech space are showing a bit of weakness after the disappointing earnings late yesterday from Cisco. And company chief executive Chuck Robbins went on to point to a lot of political risk in the market. He mentioned Hong Kong and China, Washington and the UK, all of which have kind of worked together to produce not only a lack of clarity, but a drop in business confidence. Right now, Cisco shares most heavily traded down about 7.8%. In the bond market right now, the U.S. 10-year Treasury down about 7 basis points in yield. We're at 181. The day's eco data kind of mixed. In terms of PPI, we were up 0.4% in October, the most in 6 months. The cost of food, energy, services fueling that increase. However, if you look at PPI year over year, wholesale inflation kind of moderated a bit. The dollar is a little weaker here against the majors, and with this risk-off move that we're seeing now in equities, a rally in the yen to 108.38. We also heard today from Fed Chair Jay Powell, who called the American economy a star, and Walmart shares down a bit. The earnings were very good, but there's a persistent concern here about the weakness in Sam's Club, along with slow progress on diversifying, I should say, some sales beyond groceries. That's a quick look at markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Thank you, Doug, and I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Then what you see is what you get. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the market from a macro level, and then we're going to go down a level with George Schulte. He is the founder of Schulte Asset Management. He's based up in Rye Brook, New York, just up the New Haven line, I believe, from us here in New York City. He joins Taylor Riggs and myself. So, George, great to see you.
Great to be here again. Thank you.
All right, so this market, I feel like we're trying to now make some sense of it as we get closer to the end of the year. As you sort of look back over 19, what's your takeaway so far?
Well, it's been quite a phenomenal amount of growth. I mean, this has been going on for 11 years now.
Yeah.
And so you have, kind of an uncertain situation, though. I think Powell's struggling with it, with extremely low interest rates, stubbornly low inflation. But there's still quite the amount of monetary accommodation going on in the U.S. There's a lot of fiscal policy accommodation as well. You have the unemployment rate close to a 50-year low at about 3.6%. You have growth in the U.S. at about 1.9%. I guess a little bit soft in the last quarter due to the GM strike and some weakness in business investment. But again, inflation is stubbornly low, still below 2% at 1.7%. And I think that's why Powell, is continuing to put his foot down on the accelerator.
George, it's Taylor Riggs. I'm out here in San Francisco covering all things technology. So what I'm doing is I'm going around and asking everyone I know in New York the same poll question to try to get my head wrapped around the real story. I've been covering tech. Let's pretend I've been ignoring everything else. Tell me, what is driving the markets right now? Is it Powell, impeachment, earnings? What have I missed?
So I think one of the big things that's driving tech is just money inflows into the massive ETFs that are forced to buy the largest growing companies. I think there's also a wave of new cash still flooding into the fixed income market. And I think that is probably creating some risks because I think companies are probably borrowing a little bit more than they should be at this point in the cycle. I think it's a function of interest rates being so low and investors desperate for fixed income yield. And I think because of that, you're seeing some some interesting things in the tech space, like with WeWork. I mean, that company probably shouldn't be borrowing money, but it's able to, or was able to borrow money up until now, even though by all means it looks like it's probably an insolvent enterprise. Right. So there's some very unique things happening in the market because interest rates are really so low. They're as low as they've been in the history of the planet. Right. And this past summer, of course, we saw negative yielding debt reach $17 trillion. That's never happened before in the history of the world. So I think what it's generating is the risk of asset bubbles, and hopefully, as some of those unwind, you won't have systemic risk or systemic fallout that could cause a real shock.
So I know part of your background, and you never fully leave this world, is special situations, distress. Not a lot of distress, it feels like, in the world at the moment, but there are always special situations. And one of them that I believe you've looked at is actually right there in Taylor's backyard, which is PG&E, right?
Yeah.
How do you look at a name like that?
So a lot of people say, by the way, with regard to distress, that there's not much going on. But I think that's a bit of a misnomer. Okay. Because if you look at the default rate, which a lot of the major investment banks that like to sell high-yield bonds, it really just measures junk-rated debt default rates. And it's below 3%. But here you have PG&E, which is one of the 10 largest bankruptcies of all time, and it's active right now. I think, by the way, just parenthetically, some of the other California utilities might be at risk too because of, the terrible wildfires we've had out there. But yeah, the way we look at that is just like any other distressed credit. We look at the company's capital structure. In this case, because it has so much litigation liability, you can throw in about 25, maybe even as high as 30 billion of additional claims into the capital structure, and then try to value the business on an unlevered basis and try to figure out where in the pecking order, the lenders or maybe even the equity owners would get a recovery. In this case, we think that ultimately there have been, a number of plans of reorganizations proposed. There's been a lot of litigation back and forth about who has control over the case. Recently, the judge gave the bondholders approval to file a plan, and their plan looks like it dilutes the equity holders down to nearly nothing, which is actually typically what happens with bankrupt companies. So we think short selling the PG&E stock just under $7 a share makes a lot of sense for a potential 100% return. That's probably the lowest risk way to play this. And separately, of course, the situation in California with forest fires and new fires even after the bankruptcy, it's really terrible. And, we hope they figure it out there.
George, reading through your recommendations, you talk about stock buybacks and special dividends and or M&A. I'm taking a look at a chart here, and it's the Invesco buyback ETF. So they invest in companies that have bought back at least 5% of their shares in the last few years. And that's outperforming the dividend ETF, which invests in companies that have consistently raised their dividend over the last 10 years. Why are companies that are doing share buybacks outperforming companies that are raising their dividends?
That's a good question, and that's an interesting observation about it outperforming. I think that makes sense in my view because essentially, companies are making the decision to buy back their own stock when they think it's cheap. And the result for remaining shareholders who do not sell into that buyback, whether it's sort of a program or a special one-time buyback, is that you reduce the float outstanding, and the smaller universe of shareholders can share the same cash flow that you had before, all other things equal. So it also happens to, it tends to put a bottom on a stock that might be volatile. And so I think management teams and boards that are deciding to do that, in many cases it's the right thing because they're reducing float that really they don't need. It's a higher form of, or a higher cost of capital. Certainly than you can get in the fixed income market these days. And if you're under levered, meaning you're not even investment grade, like you have hardly any debt at all, this might be a great way to use your capital.
Right. All right. Always good to catch up with you. Thank you so much for coming in. George Schulte is founder of Schulte Asset Management based up in Rye Brook, New York, here with us in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio today. And coming up, Taylor, we're going to talk a little Business Week economics. Kathleen Hayes is going to join us, as is Yelena Shalecheva. And a little later on, we're going to do a little tech with Ashley Vance, talk about that place up in the Arctic where the code is stored, the apocalypse code, maybe you could call it.
This is an amazing story, Jason. I am so excited.
All right, that's all coming up here on a Thursday edition of Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Taylor Riggs, right here on Bloomberg Radio.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition.
For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked breads to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Nick Jonas tells Insider.com that his wife Priyanka Chopra is his best teammate. Nick says, our schedule this early on in our marriage was kind of unexpected, but she's the best teammate in all that. Meanwhile, Selena Gomez tells USA Today that her new music is going to be different than her past efforts. Selena says, I definitely explored more with electric guitar, a lot of more soulful tracks underneath things, acoustic guitar. For more music from Selena Gomez and Nick Jonas, search today's hits on TuneIn.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
Walmart shares rose to a record today after an overall better-than-expected summer quarter. Sales improved and online sales were up 41% as more shoppers purchase groceries online from Walmart and have them delivered. It's also raising its forecast for the year. Scott Martin of Kingsview Asset Management says there are now 3 clear leaders in retail.
The consumer is so strong.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from Fox News on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fans, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can hear every NFL game live as it's happening, or catch it later on demand, anytime, anywhere, all season long.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Krisner. It is 3 p.m. on Wall Street. We have an hour remaining in today's session. Right now, a mixed one for the equity market, with the Dow off from a record high by less than 0.1%, although the NASDAQ composite is showing a similar amount of weakness. It was not at a record yesterday. The S&P 500 is holding at a record 3,094 with a gain of less than 0.1%. Today's eco data here in the States was a little mixed, and now on top of that, we've got growing concern over the fate of a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. Overnight, the data that we had on the Chinese economy was a bit on the weak side, particularly the industrial production number, although Bloomberg Intelligence saying it really highlights deceleration as opposed to an outright collapse. Most heavily traded by far, Cisco stock is down more than 7.5%. The company was out with disappointing earnings after the bell yesterday, and then on the call with analysts, CEO Chuck Robbins pointed to a number of political events around the globe, things like Hong Kong, China, Washington, Brexit, all of which have kind of worked in concert to produce not only a lack of clarity, but a drop in business confidence. Walmart shares weaker by about 0.8%. They're kind of reversing themselves a bit. We were stronger in the day, given some solid third quarter earnings, but the more that the market has kind of considered Walmart and the story there, kind of focused on persistent weakness, not only in Sam's Club, but some of the slow progress that there has been at Walmart in diversifying sales beyond groceries. U.S. 10-year Treasury losing about 7 basis points in yield right now. We're trading 181. The PPI data, at least the headline number, was a little hot, a gain of 0.4%. But if you back out and look at PPI year over year, wholesale inflation essentially moderated. Some dollar weakness today with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.1%, but the risk-off mood in markets generally has produced a much stronger Japanese yen here at 108.4, and that's going to weigh on the Japanese equity market when things in Tokyo are up and running in about 4 hours' time. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Taylor Riggs was very excited, speaking into a non-working microphone. I can see her, and now she's laughing at herself, which is good. Right, Tay? You have a good sense of humor.
In San Francisco, we just don't take ourselves too seriously. That's just such a New York thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, because if there's one thing I know about you, it's just like you're not very serious. You're just like loosey-goosey all the time. All right, Business Week Economics, it's time for that. Kathleen Hayes is actually out your way, not far from where you are. She's, of course, Global Economics and Policy Editor. She's joining us on the phone from the San Francisco Fed. Yelena Shalecheva is right here next to me. She is Senior U.S. Economist for Bloomberg Economics. So, Yelena, I actually want to start with you because Powell today, back up on Capitol Hill, felt like it was a little livelier than yesterday, maybe a little. What do you think?
I felt a little bit more optimistic today. He was talking about how the economy is doing just fine, how you see the historically tight labor market, and that the manufacturing recession is not spilling over into a broader economy. So he was talking along those lines. Obviously, the prepared remarks were the same, but I'm talking about the question and answer session. And to me, the tone of his remarks today felt a little bit upbeat.
So, excuse me for asking a dumb question, but then why are we cutting interest rates?
Well, they are not, right? So that's exactly why they would like to pause here. And I think the message that we received from Chair Powell and other policymakers just recently is that the cautious optimism that they have about economic outlook is making them wait and see and just pause here to see what happens to economic outlook going forward.
All right, so Kathleen, help synthesize what we've heard from Chair Powell over the past couple of days with what you're hearing out there. Your big interview, obviously, with Mary Daly yesterday. We talked about that. But as you have continued to think about that, as you've talked to other people, what's your takeaway broadly from this Fed right now?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that take a look at the bond market. I don't think it's the bond market, the reflation trade, the Fed's done. I don't think it's quite as strong. We've seen another rally on the bond market today. The benchmark 10 years down to 1.81. You've got the 30-year up, 1 and, 10-30 seconds. I guess that's 516, seals back down to 305. Now, they're still towards the high end of their ranges. However, if you're watching the world broadly right now, yes, Jay Powell is optimistic and positive. Why not? Because things look pretty good, right? Mary Daly, things are in a good place. But Mary yesterday acknowledged that, yes, if certain risks materialize, trade uncertainty and no trade deal materialize into investment in manufacturing slowdown, and that starts feeding over into consumer confidence, yes, it would be time to rethink and reassess. That's not where we are. China data overnight, the big three that come out on the same day: industrial profits, retail sales, investment figures, all weaker than forecast. China is not getting better yet. There's no trade deal on the horizon. Now, will that cause the Fed to cut rates right away? No, and maybe never. But I think it's interesting that the bond market is now just having a little bit of a rethink, really willing to pause. And of course, it has a lot to do with the fact that the trade deal now is kind of iffy. What's going to happen? And remember, if there's no trade deal and those tariffs go on before the end of the year, U.S. manufacturing might get weaker. This might be a game changer. Way too early to tell. But I think everyone can see where the Fed is. Even Jim Bullard today is saying, hey, it looks like the Fed's done enough. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Right.
But I think the Fed's in a reasonable place, I would say. Now they just have to see what happens.
All right. Do want to bring you one headline crossing the Bloomberg, or redhead as we call it. New York Fed introducing some 28-day and 42-day repo operations. This coming from a statement regarding repurchase operations. This is something, Yelena, we've kept a very close eye on in terms of how the New York Fed, which oversees all of this, is managing that repo element that I think many people are like, wait, what is that again? But has become one of the really sort of strong storylines of the last 6 to 8 weeks in eco world, right? Or certainly in bond world.
I just wonder at which point we will stop paying that much attention to this redheads, because this is supposed to be a regular thing, regular operation that the Fed is doing, and I think at some point we will. So they are trying to take care of this, and they're being very proactive right now. So I think it's just...
We call that a Yelena yawn, right?
No, it's not a yawn. We do need to pay attention to these things, particularly at the time where we're still very close to this threshold on excess reserves, at which they might be considered not enough. So, but I think at some point it's just going to become some sort of a regular thing.
Right. Well, it's sort of the lack of regularity is in part why it feels like they feel the need to keep coming out about this, right, Jay?
Well, yeah. I mean, sorry, I'm trying to ignore what you're saying, Jason, because I'm trying to get back to Kathleen. Bear with me, because I've been thinking about this for the last few minutes, and I cannot wrap my head around it. Kathleen, I have been hearing about the trade war since March of 2018, and it hasn't really hit the data. The consumer is still strong. Why is the Fed still talking about risks of the trade fight when it hasn't really affected things?
Look at the manufacturing sector, my dear. Look at the Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing. It's been negative. Business investment is weak. People think one of the reasons is uncertainty. Again, look at China's economy. It's the second biggest economy in the world. Exports to the United States make a big, big difference to that economy. It continues to weaken. There's no doubt that the trade war has done damage. What's fascinating, yes, consumer continues to hold up because our economy, we depend to a certain extent on exports, but not like other countries. But we are creating jobs, etc.
Let me just add to that. So we have not seen a significant impact that, we would start screaming, oh, okay, so now it's really impacting the economy because the consumer has been doing just fine. Yeah. But that means that the economy is very much vulnerable to any external shocks.
Right.
So that's a problem.
All right. Much more to come, we know, in the days to come. Thank you both so much. Let's get to Bob Moon. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, only a few minutes had passed since Eric McElroy had dropped off his son at school this morning in the Los Angeles suburb of Santa Clarita. He got a bad feeling, he says, seeing emergency vehicles speed past him in the opposite direction. And then a nightmare text message from his son about a fellow student.
He texted me and said that he saw him pull out a gun and start shooting, and he immediately ran with his friends the opposite direction and took shelter in a classroom.
The LA County Sheriff reported a female student was killed and now says a 14-year-old boy has died as well following that shooting 30 miles northwest of Los Angeles. Another student was reported in critical condition, and the student with the gun also has been hospitalized. We live in times when the shooting stories all too often overlap one another. Just today, Walmart workers in El Paso, Texas, greeted shoppers with cheers of welcome back as they reopened the store where a gunman targeting, he said, a Mexican invasion killed 22 people in August. The 220,000 square foot Walmart has been made over, and store manager Robert Evans has shepherded his roughly 350 employees through a difficult recovery since they were called back to get the store back up and running.
You can see the hugs and some tears, and now you see some hugs and some smiles and laughter, and so that's really encouraging to see that they've gone through some healing process just working together side by side.
Walmart faces ongoing lawsuits over safety. Global News 24 hours a day. I'm Bob Moon.
1858. The first transatlantic cable brings news of Europe.
We have the US tariffs on European goods. Would you be standing ready to buy UK domestic stocks now?
It works for 3 weeks. Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
You are expecting an end of uncertainty.
It works every time.
What are you looking for in the event of a deal? There are a confluence of factors.
Weekdays at 1 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, That's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Dad, can I get your opinion on something?
Yes, of course.
Dad, I just wanted to bend your ear.
Sure.
Dad, can I ask you a question?
How can I help?
At McDonald's, we know there's no substitute for experience. That's why we value the life skills people over 60 bring to our restaurants. To find out more about joining us, search McDonald's jobs, role models, made at McDonald's.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
The Federal Trade Commission started a preliminary investigation into Visa and MasterCard over debit card transactions. Bloomberg's reporting it's looking at whether these companies barred merchants from using other debit networks. Ferrari wants you, Porsche buyer. It's unveiled a new sports coupe aimed at those who would buy a Porsche 911, part of an overhaul.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throwing down. Right corner three, another one.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
What if, instead of browsing the World Wide Web, we were all browsing GopherNet?
Gopher is easy to navigate and easy to browse.
Because in the early 90s,
Gopher was taking off faster.
Until they made one crucial mistake.
At that point, Gopher traffic on the internet dropped off.
Find out why open source won the battle for the internet next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
On the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, and a shot,
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Nick Jonas tells Insider.com that his wife Priyanka Chopra is his best teammate. Nick says, our schedule this early on in our marriage was kind of unexpected, but she's the best teammate in all that. Meanwhile, Selena Gomez tells USA Today that her new music is going to be different than her past efforts. Selena says, I definitely explored more with electric guitar, a lot of more soulful tracks, underneath things, acoustic guitar. For more music from Selena Gomez and Nick Jonas, search today's hits on TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
At 17 past the hour, let's get you caught up on market action. A little bit of downside bias here in equities and growing concern over the fate of a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. Jack Ma was telling us earlier, Jack is the co-founder and former chairman of Alibaba. He was saying the trade turbulence between the U.S. and China could last 20 years if the two superpowers aren't careful. Right now, the offshore Chinese yuan relatively stable against the dollar, although we're seeing some dollar weakness. Let's take you to the Bloomberg Macro Squawk Desk. Bill Maloney is there with a look at market action. Hey, Bill.
And thanks, Doug. Main U.S. averages are somewhat quiet right now, with the Dow currently down 23 points. S&Ps are a little changed, and NASDAQ is lower by 7. The U.S. 10-year yield falls to 1.82%. Small caps fall 2 points, but 6 of the main 11 SB sectors are still trading higher, led by gains in materials and real estate. Energy led to the downside. Nasdaq biotechs fall 25 points. Transports gain 8. Semis drop 0.4%. And the VIX is higher by 2%. Leaders to the upside on the Dow, Boeing, UNH, and Home Depot, while Cisco fell 7.4% after earnings and led to the downside. Also after earnings, Walmart fell 1%, reversing gains of 3.6%. And you mentioned trade. The FT reported that the U.S. and China are struggling to close the Phase 1 deal. In other news, Kraft Heinz fell 6% after Goldman Sachs cut its ratings to sell. And wrapping things up, NVIDIA reports after the bell. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Doug.
All right, Bill, thank you. U.S. 10-year Treasury right now yielding 1.81%. That's markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Thank you, Doug. And I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
All right, so the cover story this week in Bloomberg Business Week, it's a must-read, and once you read it, I guarantee you're going to be talking about it. Ashley Vance wrote it. He is a writer, a host, an author, so many things here at Bloomberg. He joins us on the phone from Palo Alto. Joel Weber, the editor of Bloomberg Business Week, is here with me in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. And I have to say, Ashley, when I first read this story, I did, to quote my co-host Carol Masser, a wait, what? Sort of moment. How did this even come onto your radar screen?
Well, I've been covering open source for about 20 years, and I got a call from GitHub, which is kind of the biggest platform for where open source code gets made these days, and they told me they had this crazy idea to go bury the world's source code in Svalbard, and I managed to talk my way into seeing it.
So, Ashley, what was it like? I think you told me yesterday it was literally like a storage shed. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, they had sent us some photos beforehand of artist mock-ups of what this thing would look like. It was very sci-fi and fantastic. And when I got there, we were down in a abandoned coal mine that used to be owned by a Norwegian company. It was covered in permafrost, and hiked our way through it, and there was this tool shed sitting there with these fancy reels of film and storage.
So Ashley, they're not the only ones who have stashed something in a cave nearby. There's also this Svalbard global seed vault, where in the event of an apocalypse, I'll go there and find some seeds. But the thinking here is that this is a place that should anything really, really go wrong in the world, we can stash things. And why open source? Why would that be we have seeds and open source? Why would open source code be the second thing we'd need to stash?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, like 20 years ago, open source was sort of a fringe idea. Software was dominated by companies like Microsoft and IBM. But, in the intervening 20 years, it's the dominant way now that code gets developed. It's open source is behind pretty much everything you use in your day-to-day life, whether it's a smartphone, your computer, your television, your car. Every piece of our infrastructure is developed by partly paid coders that do work for big companies, but also all these volunteers. And so the idea here is, look, say something just crazy happens and the modern infrastructure is brought to its knees, you would actually have kind of a backup of how these things work.
Well, and it is so interesting. And Ashley, when you think about it, and I'm glad you mentioned the idea of sort of covering open source for 2 decades, because 2 decades ago, it was like, all right, cool. Like, yeah, you guys are kind of out there on the fringes, but maybe you don't get the joke about how software is written and who controls it. But now this is, I think, accepted, not just accepted, but heavily endorsed, and has really changed the way the world works in many ways.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it, just reflecting, as I wrote the story, was, like 20 years ago, Microsoft was the enemy. It was all about making an open source version of an operating system to compete against Windows and competing against Office and things like that. The sort of like strange thing happened, which is none of that worked. Like the Linux desktop never became mainstream. But all these open source coders who were fighting this fight made these incredible tools for sharing software on the internet, developing it, and the knock-on effect was that open source became the backbone of the internet, of smartphones, and so they sort of won these 2 other wars, which is really where technology was heading rather than where it had been. And so, today, if it's Google, if it's Netflix, if it's Uber, Amazon, whoever, their infrastructure runs on open source code.
So here's the irony, Ashley. You've been doing this for 20 years. You show up at this vault with the CEO of GitHub, now owned by Microsoft, one of the very companies that was like, never will we touch open source. How ironic is that?
I mean, it's one of the craziest parts of the crazy story. If you had asked me 20 years ago if this was ever going to happen, I would have said it's impossible. I remember Steve Ballmer on stage calling open source software cancer, and giving away your code was just seen as sort of almost a criminal act by Microsoft. And last year they bought GitHub for $7.5 billion, and obviously threw their lot in with the open source crowd. And it's an incredible happening. I think a lot of it has to do with Satya Nadella coming on as CEO and sort of thinking differently about these things.
What a different a couple decades makes. Ashley?
Yeah, last question, Ashley. If I need to get there, how do I get there?
Oh, boy.
Well, the easiest way, you got to take a couple hops, but you can. There's like 1 or 2 flights per day from Norway, and I think it's about a 2-hour flight. And there's like 2,000 people that live in Svalbard.
I hope you left breadcrumbs for me.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
Thanks, Ashley.
It's a great story. It's the cover of this week's new issue of Bloomberg Business Week. Ashley Vance wrote it. He went there and wrote all about it. He joined us from Palo Alto. Joel Weber here with me in New York City. Jason Kelly, Taylor Riggs here with you on a Thursday afternoon. And this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks are mixed in the final hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 11. The S&P 500 is up 1. The Nasdaq Composite down 4. Sears is tightening its belt. Sources say the struggling retailer has fired about 300 employees from corporate headquarters and field positions. The company says it's been pruning operations that have struggled due to increased competition and other factors. Unemployment lines grew last week as first-time claims for jobless benefits rose to the highest level since late June. The government says claims increased by 14,000 to 225,000, still low by historical standards. It's back to the future for Motorola. It's reimagining its iconic Razr flip phone for a new generation. It'll be a 6.2-inch Android smartphone with a foldable display, priced at $1,500. China's Lenovo now owns the Motorola brand. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative, and that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscription.
The S in Audi S-Line stands for many things like sporty, stylish, streamlined, and now seductively priced. Like the new Audi A4 S-Line, which you can now have from £359 per month, £2,154 initial rental. Test drive one at your local Audi centre, but you'll have to be swift. The offer ends soon. Search Audi S-Line. Audi, Vorsprung durch Technik. With 48-month contract hire, 10,000 miles per annum, 18s and over, subject to status. Damage charges may apply. No ownership. Ordered by 31st of December 2019 from participating centres. Audi Financial Services. Visit audi.co.uk.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
It's hard to enjoy your daily yoga routine when your mind is on your next VAT return and how to avoid the usual mistakes. But with QuickBooks, the new VAT Smart Scan technology does the work for you. As the deadline approaches, it checks for duplicates, looks for anomalies, and reviews VAT codes. So your biggest struggle is touching your forehead with your ankle. Search for QuickBooks, perfect for making tax digital. QuickBooks, backing you.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap. The give Jones up the middle. Runs it back. He's to the 10 to the 5 to the end zone. Touchdown.
This Thursday, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Getting pressure again. Rolls to his right. He's going to run with it. He's a 5. Touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
What if, instead of browsing the World Wide Web, we were all browsing GopherNet?
Gopher is easy to navigate and easy to browse.
Because in the early 90s...
Gopher was taking off faster.
Until they made one crucial mistake.
At that point, Gopher traffic on the internet dropped off.
Find out why open source won the battle for the internet next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
Want to know what's happening in right now? The latest headlines are just a tap away with Fox News Talk on TuneIn. When news breaks, get up-to-the-minute coverage on developing stories from around the world. Plus, hear all the Fox shows you watch on your TV. Listen to Fox News Talk around the clock on TuneIn.
You're listening to TuneIn, where you can hear all the audio you love in one place. Live NFL games, the hottest music, breaking news, and podcasts. Push play and go about your day, only on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
And coming up, we're going to talk with our ETF expert, Eric Balchunas. He's got a new episode of his podcast, Trillions. Talking ETFs. You love ETFs, Tag.
Always, especially with Eric Balchunas.
I know. So that's coming right up. Also, Dave Wilson's chart of the day. First, let's get to Doug Krisner. He's got an update on the trade.
Jason, we're just kind of hovering right now in the equity space. There is some growing concern about the fate of a partial U.S.-China trade deal. The FT was reporting the two sides are kind of struggling to reach a Phase 1 agreement. Overnight, China did remove some curbs on poultry imports from the U.S. Is that going to be enough? We'll have to wait and see. Right now, the offshore Chinese yuan a little stronger against the dollar here at 7.0208. Some dollar weakness with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.1%. And the yen is rallying to 108.40. That's going to make life a little difficult for the Japanese equity market. Right now, the Dow is down from a record high yesterday by about 0.1%, although the S&P is extending a record by 0.1%. NASDAQ Composite weaker by 0.1%. Many in the energy space are weak today following a pullback in the price of crude oil. WTI here in New York down 0.5%. Right now in the electronic session, 56.84. Earlier, the government reported a larger than expected build in both crude and gasoline stockpiles, and at the same time indicated that U.S. domestic production reached a record in the last survey period. 10-year Treasury coming in by a little more than 6 basis points in yield. Right now, we're at 1.82%. You'd like me to go on? I can. Otherwise, I'm throwing it back to you.
Thank you, Doug. And I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Your cash ain't nothing but trash. Your cash ain't nothing but trash. Your cash ain't nothing but trash.
Cash ain't nothing but trash. I don't think I can get this artist. Who is it, Dave?
Just to make a hit with that.
I got nothing.
You got nothing? He'd be so disappointed.
I know.
I think he actually lives here in New York these days. And back in the day, he was in San Francisco. So we've got a transcontinental sort of guy, Steve Miller.
Oh, well done.
It's the Steve Miller Band. Absolutely. From back in the day. You know, it's all about cash. That's what today's chart focuses on. And it looks at cash, cash and money market investments, think equivalents to cash. For S&P 500 companies in the context of stock buybacks, and the repurchases are an area that Societe Generale focused on in a report the other day. A couple strategists over there looking at the S&P 500 specifically to try and get an idea of how things are stacking up in terms of companies taking in their own shares, in essence. And when you run the numbers on the Bloomberg terminal in terms of S&P 500 cash, it's stated on what's called a per share basis, and it peaked in the first quarter of last year. And since then, it's come down. And as of the end of this year's third quarter, you're talking about a drop of 5.3%. It was a bit more than that earlier in the year. It's come back a little bit. That said, even though companies are kind of depleting their cash to some extent by share repurchases, SocGen's looking for more. They're predicting $570 billion of buybacks next year. That's down a bit from the level this year. Nonetheless, it's still quite a bit of money. And just to provide some context, they noted that S&P 500 companies since 2010 have bought back the equivalent of 22% of the index's market value. It just shows you how prevalent buybacks have been. And now we're starting to see companies' cash go down. So you have to wonder how things are going to unfold from here. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Well, thank you, Dave Wilson. I especially love these segments, Jason, because when I make a joke about wanting to do a chart on radio, Dave Wilson reminds me that he has been doing charts on radios pretty much for the last few decades.
Yeah, he's the OG.
Politely puts me in my place. So thank you very much for that, Dave. I want to switch topics, Jason, and turn it over and bring it in our own Eric Balchunas. He is looking at the new podcast of Trillions, this time on direct investing. Eric, why direct investing?
Yeah, it's actually called direct indexing, but a lot of people call it direct investing too. But essentially, this is supposed to be some people actually called it maybe the ETF killer. You know, ETFs disrupted the mutual fund, and what's going to disrupt the ETF? Some people have pointed to direct indexing. What this essentially is a separately managed account. It just has a flashy new name. It's democratizing what institutions, a lot of them do, which is if you want the S&P, maybe you want to pluck out a few stocks, you know, like a tailored suit, you would go to BlackRock and they would just make an account for you separately. You wouldn't use the ETF, and you get it cheap. And so this is sort of the same idea. You can go in, you can get a custom portfolio to your liking. It will charge a little more than an ETF, which is a big hurdle, maybe 30 basis points. ETFs you can get for like 10 now. But the customization is one feature. The other feature is what they call tax alpha. If you own, say, 300 of the S&P 500 stocks or all 500, you have many more losses in which you can harvest. And in this long bull market, losses are desirable. And so there's a big selling point in getting some extra tax benefit from doing it using direct indexing versus using an ETF. So far, it's got about $300 billion in assets, which is, you know, maybe 5-6% of what ETFs have. But this is something we explored, and we had the CEO of the biggest company on the podcast.
Yeah. And so who's the typical customer here, Eric?
Yeah, right now, the typical customer, the ideal customer would be somebody who's pretty wealthy, has a lot of, maybe they do charity, they've got a lot going on, and taxes are like their worst enemy, right? Somebody like that. Probably not a younger millennial investor or anything like that. I also think that kind of a client that an advisor would use, the advisor may also want to give their best client the latest gadget and technology. And this might qualify as that. You know, the advisor's always looking for ways to add more value.
Right.
And having a direct indexing option would be a good one for a bigger advisor, for a big client. But I think the majority of advisor clients probably find in ETFs or mutual funds that makes it very easy.
All right. Well, we really appreciate it as always. You got to check it out. It's the new episode of Trillions. It's all about direct indexing. Eric Balchunas is senior ETF analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He joined us on the phone from New Jersey. Always like catching up with him on the latest and greatest in ETFs. Coming up, we're going to get you to the drive to the close, get you right up to the close of trading here on a Thursday afternoon. Taylor Riggs, I know you're going to be preparing for your big technology show as well.
Yeah, there's so much coming up. We're going to be following Jason as we head into close, wrapping up Walmart. We're going to be taking a look at shares of NVIDIA.
Right.
So a lot of still earnings going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to bring you all of that and more. But first, let's get to World and National Headlines with Bob Moon.
Jason, it happens every school day all across America. School kids keenly aware of the loud noises they hear and having to second guess whether they need to run. This morning, it happened in the LA suburb of Santa Clarita when a high school student opened fire in a classroom, killing at least 2 other students, a boy and a girl, and wounding 3 others before shooting himself in the head. Authorities say he's been hospitalized. And these 2 girls join the long and ever-growing list of traumatized kids.
We heard what sounded like binders dropping, because that happens, or a birthday balloon popping, especially by the library where it echoes. But then there was still something in our gut that told us that it was wrong.
That doesn't sound exactly like a balloon.
And so everyone went quiet, and then we heard two more. And that's when
we're like, this is not okay. Something is wrong. This is not normal.
What's long since become the new normal for American families also left parents traumatized, waiting as close as they could get to the school to see the faces of their children, give them tearful hugs, and know for sure they're okay. There's word a second U.S. Embassy staffer in Kiev overheard a cell phone call between President Trump and his ambassador to the European Union discussing a need for Ukrainian officials to pursue investigations to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son. The Associated Press is reporting, the second source, the July 26 call between Trump and Gordon Sondland was first described during testimony yesterday by William Taylor, the acting U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. And those impeachment hearings are set to resume tomorrow. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network number 1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us number 1 in client support, number 1 in firm leadership, number 1 in operational support, number 1 in compensation, number 1 in professional development support, and number 1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobily impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Nick Jonas tells Insider.com that his wife Priyanka Chopra is his best teammate. Nick says, "Our schedule this early on in our marriage was kind of unexpected, but she's the best teammate in all that." Meanwhile, Selena Gomez tells USA Today that her new music is going to be different than her past efforts. Selena says, "I definitely explored more with electric guitar. A lot of more soulful tracks, underneath things, acoustic guitar." For more music from Selena Gomez and Nick Jonas, search today's hits on TuneIn.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap, the give Jones up the middle, runs it back. He's to the 10 to the 5 to the end zone. Touchdown.
This Thursday, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Getting pressure again, rolls to his right. He's going to run with it. He's the 5. Touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
What if, instead of browsing the World Wide Web, we were all browsing GopherNet?
Gopher is easy to navigate and easy to browse.
Because in the early 90s,
Gopher was taking off faster.
Until they made one crucial mistake.
At that point, Gopher traffic on the internet dropped off.
Find out why open source won the battle for the internet next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
The swagger of a perfect dunk.
The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throwing right corner three. Another
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Some days life can get in the way of catching up on the news that moves your world. TuneIn is here to help. With live 24/7 coverage from CNN wherever you go on the TuneIn app, you can always find a slice of your schedule, however long, to check in on the biggest stories of the day.
Hell hath no fury. The president's counselor went on a rampage on a taped phone call with Washington Examiner reporter.
Search CNN on TuneIn to get the live news when it matters most.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
At 47 past the hour, we're 13 minutes away from the closing bell. Let's get you caught up on markets. I'm tracking Class A shares in Alphabet, the parent of Google, well off their best levels of the day on a report. The 50 states' attorneys general investigating Google are now preparing to expand their antitrust investigation. CNBC saying this will move beyond the company's ad business and dive more deeply into search and the Android operating system. Now, after trading as high as 13.15, Class A shares in Alphabet right now at 13.05. Still positive on the day by about 0.7%, but well off session highs. Generally speaking, for the equity market, we're trading mixed. The Dow off from a record by 0.1%. A lot of concern here on uncertainty with respect to the U.S.-China trade deal. FT was reporting earlier the two sides are struggling to reach a phase one agreement. Overnight, China did remove some curbs on poultry imports from the U.S. Question is, how much is that really worth at the end of the day? S&P is extending a record by just 0.1%. NASDAQ Composite, meantime, weaker by 0.1%. You know, interesting on the subject of U.S.-China trade, Jack Ma, the co-founder and former chairman of Alibaba, was telling us earlier, turbulence between the U.S. and China could last 20 years if these two superpowers aren't careful. Cisco remains most heavily traded at this hour. Stocks down more than 7%. Disappointing earnings late yesterday, continuing to work negatively on price action. U.S. 10-year Treasury right now yielding 1.82%. That's a look at markets. Back to Bloomberg Business Week.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
Yeah, how about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, it is time for the Drive to the Close. Ron Carson back with us, CEO of the Carson Group, looking after about $11.5 billion. He joins us on the phone from Omaha, Nebraska. Ron, great to have you with Taylor and myself.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks
for
having me.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a variation of a very good question that Taylor asked earlier, which is, as you look across the landscape here, how do you sort of rank the things to either worry about or pay the most attention to? You know, you sort of think about geopolitics, you think about trade, you think about the Fed, you think about earnings. Like, what's your sort of list of priorities here?
Well, I think you nailed them all. I mean, the thing that I think is going to drive the market. I was just with I'm actually in Sarasota, Florida right now, just with one of our clients, and he said, hey, what's going to happen next year? I said, I have no idea. And so he pushed me. He said, well, what are the things you're going to worry about? And I said, well, you know, right now, I think the market's going to start to start handicapping the election. And, you know, one extreme, you know, President Trump gets reelected. I think it's going to be pretty good for the market. But I don't think he's going to get reelected unless we get, you know, a real a trade deal On the other hand, Elizabeth Warren will become our next president. It's going to be really bad for the markets. I think really as we look into the future here, the market's going to start to handicap those things. Of course, we've got Brexit and we've got, the Fed out there, and we've got China trade, which seems to be, moving the markets every day. But I would really start thinking about who's going to be in office with the next election cycle.
So we talk about handicapping the next election, and yet equities are near their all-time highs. What gives?
Well, I think the markets are telling you that they think Trump's going to be reelected. And, as the market's handicap it right now, this market's been really resilient. And I think the market loves the fact that we've got, Powell out there saying, hey, we really don't have anything that we're too worried about right now. This is sustainable. On that note, I will share with you, not the last Fed meeting, but the Fed meeting before. I just so happened that same evening after they voted, had dinner with one of the voting members. And my concern was then that, hey, do we really understand all the variables and all the things that could trip us up? And he made a great point in that, we really are on top of all of this. And, I saw it also on a different article today. The U.S. is still the reserve currency of the world. We have $23 trillion. A lot of people got to own the dollar. They got to participate here. And I think that also is going to provide a floor, for the market for a while.
So, Ron, very much top of mind for us today. We did a whole segment on it earlier in the show, was Walmart. We saw those numbers come out. Obviously, Walmart, a bellwether in some ways across retail, across, e-commerce as well, as Taylor rightly pointed out earlier in the show, a sign of consumer demand, a sign of trade tensions being there or not there. How do you read it, and how does that maybe affect your outlook, especially when it comes to the consumer and retail?
Yeah, the consumer is strong, and the consumer continues to be strong. We had the employment report was better than expected. I noticed claims were a little higher today than the market thought. But, companies like Walmart, I think tells us just how strong the consumer is. And we love Walmart. I mean, attractive offering in here continues to pressure the tier 2 and tier 3 retailers, and is making significant strides into the e-commerce business. And this is a good example, and pays a nice dividend yield. You're getting a 180, maybe a hair less than a 180 yield, which in today's environment is pretty good. And so I think being surgical is going to be really key here. Really understanding why you're owning what you're owning. And as Buffett says from my very own Omaha, Nebraska, we're buying companies or businesses at an intrinsic value to what we believe their value is. And I think just buying the whole market is probably not the approach most investors should take here, but be more surgical.
So if you are becoming more of a stock picker, being more surgical, really knowing what you're buying, let's say you want to get a little bit defensive here. I was reading a report by UBS, and they said just on a pure valuation basis at this point, when they're going within the defensive sectors, they're looking at healthcare over utilities. If you were to go defensive, where do you like companies within that space?
Yeah, healthcare, I mean, we like a lot. And healthcare, I mean, just look at the demographics, right? And how old we're getting. Celgene was a great example of that. We had held Celgene in our portfolios for some time. And of course, we're going to be taken out by Bristol Myers. But I think that, companies that are doing that, another one that got hit really hard was Myriad Genetics, MYGN. We think this is a really attractive entry point into a company like that as well. But anything that's going to provide, for example, with Myriad, you can get some testing done, get out ahead of whatever your issues are, or providing like a Celgene and their cancer therapy, something that's really going to enhance quality of life. So we like healthcare in here.
All right. Ron Carson is the CEO of Carson Group, overseeing about $11.5 billion. He joined us on the phone from Omaha, Nebraska. Some great context, as always. And Taylor, as we look ahead, just a couple minutes left in the trading day here in the U.S. I mean, stocks essentially flat. Your tech stocks there, the NASDAQ down just a fraction, a couple hundredths of percentage point. The S&P barely holding on to its gains. We're going to break all of that down in the next few minutes, do some movers and shakers. We will hear Dave Wilson's stock of the day. We're also awaiting word from NVIDIA. I know that's going to be top of mind for you.
100%. We're going to wait for those earnings to come out, as well as a slew of others. And I like earnings season, Jason. We get back down to fundamentals, what's really driving the companies.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Simon Cowell thinks One Direction will do a reunion tour. E! News quotes Simon as saying, "My gut feeling is yes. I mean, they're all doing great solo-wise at the moment, but they had a lot of hits. So they could do a tour after tour after tour." Meanwhile, Yahoo News claims Billie Eilish and Urban Outfitters have teamed up for a new clothing collection. Billie's line includes t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, and shorts. To hear more music from One Direction and Billie Eilish, search today's hits on TuneIn.
Far wing elevates, triple bucket.
The roar of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut
the
it.
sideline, the Van Fleet for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now. Hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on
Search
the right
NBA today to start listening.
On the goal line, scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
The move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
That's the sound of the closing bell for this Thursday, November 14th. And a little bit of a mixed picture for equity trading today. We're going to need a few moments for these numbers to reflect accurate settlement, but it looks at this point as though the S&P and the Dow will extend record highs barely. The S&P right now showing a gain of a tenth of 1%. We had some mixed economic data here in the States, along with growing concern about the fate of a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. Earlier, the FT had reported the two sides are struggling to reach a Phase 1 agreement. Overnight, China did remove some curbs on poultry imports from the U.S. We were speaking earlier in the day with Jack Ma, the co-founder and former chairman of Alibaba. He told us trade turbulence between these two countries could last 20 years if these two superpowers are not careful. Now, overnight, we had some weak economic data for the Chinese economy, particularly the number on industrial production, although Bloomberg Intelligence was kind of indicating this number really shows deceleration more than it does a collapse in the Chinese economy. Right now, it looks like the Dow will end the session slightly weaker, although, as I mentioned earlier, the S&P 500 up about 0.1% on the day to a record 3,096. NASDAQ Composite showing weakness by about 0.1%. A lot of the tech stocks were hurt by the disappointing earnings yesterday from Cisco. Those shares most heavily traded in the regular session, down more than 7%. Walmart shares down about 0.8%. Looks, in spite of the solid third quarter numbers, as the market was focused on persistent weakness at Sam's Club, along with more concern about slower progress in Walmart's move to try to diversify sales beyond groceries. U.S. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York down more than 6 basis points in yield to 1.82%. Some dollar weakness, although a rally in the Japanese yen to 108.44. I'm Doug Krisner in New York. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Wild thing, think you move me. I got a few moves I know you'll like.
Oh, come on, Timmy. Shake him, not stir.
Just move on toward your destination.
I can make things move without touching them.
Shake it all over.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers, with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
And let's do a little moving and shaking. Check out your winners and losers here on a Thursday afternoon. You heard the numbers from Doug Krisner. Let's take you down a level on the S&P. Taylor Riggs looking at the split. 298 names up, 205 down, 2 names unchanged. You heard Doug talk about Cisco. That is your worst performer, down 7.3%. What do you see as you're looking across the day there, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm looking down at some of the individual stocks. We are leading off our tech show in just less than an hour now with Uber. So we have Travis Kalanick.
Nice preview. Thanks for giving us that.
Yeah, hashtag humble brag over here. Travis Kalanick, since the lockup expired, Jason, has now sold $711 million of his Uber stake since that lockup expired. As we know, it could be selling to fund some of his other ventures that he has going on. I think insiders and investors do get a little bit nervous when you have big key founding players start to sell their stake. You wonder if they see something or if it really is just selling for other opportunities. So Uber shares are closing. That is definitely one story that we are looking at. And then I still have to ride this streaming train. Jason, this has been the story of the year, I'm going to call it.
Yep, you're right.
Disney yesterday closed at a record high. It's off a little bit of that today. But then you have analysts at Netflix coming out really trying to defend the stock, saying that Netflix can keep up. We do know that Disney has been arguably the number 2 competitor to Netflix. And so we have an analyst over at Imperial Capital saying, you know what? Netflix investors, they're overestimating the risk that Disney is going to take out Netflix. We're reiterating our buy on the stock. Wait for the 3rd season of The Crown to come out. Everything at Netflix is going to be okay. So for me, it is all about the streaming wars.
Well, you do wonder, too. I mean, and we've talked to Geeta Ranganathan a bit about this very issue as to, and Jonathan Nelson over at Providence Equity, in terms of who are going to be the winners. And I do think it's multiple when it comes 100%. To the streaming wars, right? And it feels
2 to 4.
like
people have the capacity to get 2 or 4 streaming services.
Yeah, I just don't see an issue. It's not like cable where you have one cable provider. I think you're going to have multiple streaming services. I even think about, you know, my boys, they're not going to settle for one streaming service. They're going to want a variety of things to watch. And I don't think Disney and Netflix have that much overlap. So it did feel, as I looked at it at least, and what do I know, but it looked like the reaction on Netflix as Disney soared yesterday might be a little bit overdone, because I'm just not sure that's a 1-to-1 or a zero sum when it comes to those two names.
Well, and Rich Greenfield at Lightshed Partners would agree with you. He spoke with me yesterday.
He was on your show yesterday, yeah.
Yep, and he said cable is the loser.
Yeah.
Netflix isn't. Netflix and Disney combined can be the winners. Cable's the real loser.
Totally. One of your biggest gainers also in the tech world, Taylor, was HP, HPQ being the symbol. This is the OG HP, which may get together, it looks like, with Xerox. Carl Icahn saying he owns a 4.24% stake in HP. That helped those stocks move higher. That stock move higher, I should say, HPQ, up 3% today. I want to take a quick look at the VIX. We are, of course, awaiting a few earnings that we're going to get to. The VIX, if I can actually pull it up correctly on my terminal. Volatility, it was literally flat, 0 percentage change, 0 point change, coming in at 13 flat. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up. Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave! Who? Dave!
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Dave Wilson back with us for your stock of the day. What you got?
I've got Intelsat, Jason. It's an operator of a satellite communications network that transmits broadcast video and internet traffic. The company was founded in 1964 under government ownership and became privately owned in 2001. Now, Intelsat shares have been publicly traded since 2013. The ticker is the letter I. That's it.
Whoa.
Last year,
that's a cool
you
symbol.
want to talk whoa. Last year, Intelsat shares soared more than sixfold. The surge reflected a proposal by the company and rival SES to sell wireless frequencies they control for use in 5G networks. The plan involves so-called C-band spectrum. Intelsat and SES are seeking U.S. regulatory approval to make the sales privately. They face opposition from Senator John Kennedy, a Louisiana Republican who's seeking a public auction. Now, Kennedy's move means a C-band sale may be delayed and end up being less lucrative for Intelsat, according to J.P. Morgan. Now, the firm cut its rating on the stock to neutral from buy on Tuesday. So between that downgrade and Kennedy's push, Intelsat dropped more than 12% on Tuesday, 29% on Wednesday, and today it fell almost 16%. You put that all together, it's the stock's biggest three-day drop on record, down almost 48%.
That's amazing. And basically just eliminating every gain it had this year. It's down 43% and change for the year. That is a brutal turn for that company. It's been volatile over the years. I mean, it's sort of a big bet type stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about, the Internet of Things, the next generation of wireless service, that they would be able to profit from it. Now that's really being called into question. I mean, not everyone is concerned about this push for a public auction. High Securities, for one, is figuring that it's not going to happen, but the doubt's out there, and that's enough to send the stock tumbling.
It certainly seems to be that way. A great name, Dave Wilson. Not great news for Intelsat, but a very interesting stock of the day. As always, Dave Wilson, you'll be back with us tomorrow for some market context, your chart, and your stock. Jason Kelly, Taylor Riggs here with you. In the meantime, let's get to Bob Moon for some world national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, a 16-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy are dead and 3 others wounded after another student opened fire at a Southern California high school this morning. Sheriff's Homicide Captain Kent Wegener told reporters the scene was captured on security video at the school in the suburb of Santa Clarita, about 30 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles.
Detectives have reviewed the video at the scene, which clearly show the subject in the quad withdraw a handgun from his backpack, shoot and wound 5 people, and then shoot himself in the head.
No details on a motive, but authorities say today was the suspect's 16th birthday. He's hospitalized in grave condition. Anxious parents waited hours to be reunited with their kids, many of whom were escorted from the school in tears. The whistleblower is beside the point now for Democrats who say his initial concerns about President Trump's actions have been corroborated. But with the impeachment hearing set to resume tomorrow, Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports on the latest partisan point of contention.
Chairman Adam Schiff says his hearing no longer needs the whistleblower because the people who gave him the information are now testifying. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
He lied when he told the American public he did not know who this whistleblower was. He had an opportunity that the whistleblower could come forward to actually get the information.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
The whistleblower is there to speak truth to power and have protection for doing that. So I will defend the rights of the whistleblower vehemently.
The hearings continue tomorrow with Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, whom President Trump fired. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air, and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
You can't be the only one who spends time examining angles.
This sort of mini deal, what would it look like?
Considering possibilities.
From a credit perspective, this is good news.
Planning for eventualities.
This company really has to get back on a growth track.
You're right. The others are here.
General Electric is such an interesting story.
Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council. Join us in New York City on November 21st as Bloomberg Pursuits convenes the second annual The Year Ahead Luxury. Speakers include Jennifer Hyman, CEO Rent the Runway, Alessandro Bogliolo, CEO Tiffany & Company, Robert A.M. Stern, renowned architect. Supporting sponsor, Diamond Producers Association. Participating sponsor, St. Regis Hotels and Resorts. For more information, go to BloombergLive.com/TYA Luxury. Invitation code RADIO.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Stuck in traffic during the big game? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to your favorite NFL team on the go. No TV required. Even during rush hour, you won't miss a single touchdown. Listen to the NFL on TuneIn Premium today.
Good. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in!
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Want to know what's happening in right now? The latest headlines are just a tap away with Fox News Talk on TuneIn. When news breaks, get up-to-the-minute coverage on developing stories from around the world. Plus, hear all the Fox shows you watch on your TV. Listen to Fox News Talk around the clock on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
College football is live on TuneIn. Listen for free to games from more than 140 schools all season long.
To the 10, all the way to the checkerboard. Somebody stays on his feet and scores us down.
The top of the Big 12 is at stake. Reigning champion Oklahoma travels to Waco, Texas to take on the surprising undefeated Baylor Bears. The action kicks off this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Listen to every call and every game of your school all season long for free on TuneIn. Just search college to listen today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Simon Cowell thinks One Direction will do a reunion tour. E! News quotes Simon as saying, "My gut feeling is yes. I mean, they're all doing great solo-wise at the moment, but they had a lot of hits. So they could do a tour after tour after tour." Meanwhile, Yahoo News claims Billie Eilish and Urban Outfitters have teamed up for a new clothing collection. Billie's line includes t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, and shorts. To hear more music from One Direction and Billie Eilish, search today's hits on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, 17 past the hour. Let's get you caught up on market action. It was kind of a mixed day for equities. Technically speaking, the S&P did extend a record close with a gain of about 1/10%, all-time high on a closing basis of 3,096. The Dow was slightly weaker, not by much, less than 1/10%, but if you're keeping score at home, we are down from a record high, and a similar situation for the NASDAQ Composite with a loss of about 1/10%. A lot of uncertainty as to where things stand on a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. The FT had been reporting earlier in the day that two sides are struggling to reach a Phase 1 agreement. Interestingly, as Vince Signorella pointed out a moment ago, that was very similar to what the Wall Street Journal had reported yesterday. But to put it into context, overnight, China did remove curbs on poultry imports from the U.S. Whether that's going to move the needle in a big way, we'll have to wait and see. And then we had two senior U.S. senators claiming very significant progress on a Hong Kong pro-democracy bill. That's after meeting with Majority Leader McConnell. That certainly is not going to sit well with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Right now, I'm looking at a much stronger offshore Chinese yuan, 7.0196. That gain against the dollar is about 0.2%. That's a sizable move. And with the risk off in equities, a much stronger yen, 108.43. One of the big stories of the day, fallout from the disappointing earnings yesterday from Cisco. Most heavily traded by a long shot stock was down more than 7% today. You're caught up on markets. Back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly here with you on Bloomberg Radio.
Ooh, you make me nervous. Ooh, you make me wanna run away and hide.
All right, some rock and roll to bring in our next duo, the aforementioned Vincent Signorella here with me, global macro strategist for Bloomberg, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, and Katie Greifeld, as we like to call her, FX and rates reporter for Bloomberg, also here with me in New York City. And so, dynamic duo, we're looking afield a bit, over to Hong Kong. We heard a little bit of those headlines from Doug Krisner there. I guess the question on the table, Katie, is what do we make of Hong Kong through the lens of the markets?
Well, it's really interesting because if you look at the spot market, the Hong Kong dollar has been pretty resilient. It hasn't bumped up against that 7.85 per dollar level, at which point the Hong Kong Monetary Authority would probably intervene. It's only at about 7.82 right now. But if you look at the funding markets, at the money markets, you see a lot more anxiety that, maybe that resilience won't last. If you look at 3-month forward points, it's a pretty amazing chart. They've spiked to the highest since 1999, which is the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis.
Vince, before I get to you, just want to bring some quick headlines. NVIDIA, those earnings crossing the Bloomberg terminal right now, beating on the top and the bottom line, I believe, if I'm reading this right. Third quarter revenue coming in at $3.01 billion. The estimate there had been for $2.91 billion, even above the range of 2.9 to 2.98. Adjusted EPS for the third quarter coming in at $1.78. The estimate there was for $1.55. Let's see what the stock is doing. It is essentially flat. So we'll keep an eye on that. It's falling a bit, maybe on the forecast. We'll bring you more on that in just a few minutes. So, Mr. Signorella, I turn to you to help us understand what traders are saying to you about Hong Kong.
Well, there is a funding squeeze, and it's there because of the concerns of what's obviously going on with the protests. But if you look at the Hong Kong rates curve, it's trading like days of old prior to the euro, when currencies like the Italian lira and the French franc would devalue. So there's a lot of pressure in the short end. Traders are taking the 1 and 3 month forwards. So what they're doing is a swap. So they're buying forward dollars. And what this does is you sell and buy dollars, you buy and sell Hong Kong. That gives you that swap where you have Hong Kong dollars for whatever period you choose, 1 to 3 months, that either is there to fund your short Hong Kong dollar position on the hope that the cap will eventually give way, or you're lending it into a short squeeze market and trying to make money on the arbitrage by lending it into businesses, et cetera, more really financial institutions that can't get into that funding market.
That's very complicated.
It's very complicated.
What do I make of all that, Katie, if I'm not as smart as the two of you? What do I make of these sort of signals, I guess, that I'm getting? Because I do feel like the Hong Kong issue is a complicated one. Just ask anyone in the NBA. Or any CEO, for that matter. How do we see this playing out? And is this something that is a short, a midterm, or a long-term worry if you're in the business of money?
It's a great question. I mean, it is a very complicated, nuanced issue, but it's pretty simple if you're an investor. I mean, the Hong Kong dollar peg, to bet against it, Bloomberg ran a headline back in August that called this the currency that George Soros couldn't break. But you're seeing really vocal...
It's a great headline.
It is a great headline. I wish I wrote it. But you're seeing really vocal hedge fund managers, such as Kyle Bass, come out and bet that, this bout of unrest, these increasingly violent protests are going to cause capital flight out of Hong Kong, which is going to force the Hong Kong Monetary Authority to abandon the peg.
Right.
But, I mean, anyone in the market will tell you that's a fool's errand. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority has about $450 billion in FX reserves, so they can sit there and defend this peg for an indefinite period.
Well, and I do wonder, Vince, thinking about, again, sort of the business of money, one of the big questions, in my mind at least, has long been, what does this do to Hong Kong's place as a financial center? As a place where people like you would go and set up shop, and where places, big banks would expand and think about as a real anchor in that part of the world.
That's a really good question, and the thought process from the sources I talked to, and about 6 months ago when the trade talks were stalling or so around May, the talks were moved from Beijing to Shanghai. Right. And the reason for that, Mnuchin and Lighthizer were basically instructed. It's kind of one of those reveal. You open up the curtains and you look outside and you look at this massive financial district, essentially, and city that China is building. And the story goes that essentially what China would like to do, and perhaps as soon as a year from now, is to move the financial center of China from Hong Kong to Shanghai.
Right.
And then once that's all done, the riots are kind of quiet by themselves because there's no longer a worry. I mean, the money's gone.
Right.
So
interesting.
You follow the Benjamins.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
Absolutely. Or the yuan in this
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right. Great context as always. Love this team. Vincent Signorella, global macro strategist for Bloomberg, and Katie Greifeld, FX and rates reporter. Always on the case. Thank you both so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We're going to get more from NVIDIA, some instant analysis. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Call it the day stocks stood still. All three Wall Street averages finished within a few points of where they started the session. The Dow fell 2, the Nasdaq 3, the S&P rose 3. But that was good enough, though, for a new closing record there. The prospect of a trade deal between the U.S. and China has been fueling the rallies that created the records, but the Financial Times reports the U.S. and China are stuck on some difficult issues. That's preventing a partial trade deal. The report says the Trump administration is unhappy China isn't offering more concessions. The earnings report from Cisco Systems played into that. Shares fell 7%, pulling down tech shares as a whole. Cisco pulled back from profit and sales predictions, saying clients aren't spending, worried about the trade war affecting economic conditions. Even Walmart shares, which touched new records themselves, finished below the flat line. Analysts unhappy with Walmart's spending on new programs and slow progress in sales other than in groceries. I'm Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome back to the Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, and, of course, companionship. Now, let's see him in action. Look how he makes eye contact with his person. That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive. And now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
The happy dance will come in with this group.
But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
What if, instead of browsing the World Wide Web, we were all browsing GopherNet?
Gopher is easy to navigate and easy to browse.
Because in the early 90s,
Gopher was taking off faster.
Until they made one crucial mistake.
At that point, Gopher traffic on the internet dropped off.
Find out why open source won the battle for the internet next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
It's Liz Hernandez with your TuneIn Music News Update. Simon Cowell thinks One Direction will do a reunion tour. E! quotes Simon as saying, "My gut feeling is yes. I mean, they're all doing great solo-wise at the moment, but they had a lot of hits. So they could do a tour after tour after tour." Meanwhile, Yahoo News claims Billie Eilish and Urban Outfitters have teamed up for a new clothing collection. Billie's line includes t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, and shorts. To hear more music from One Direction and Billie Eilish, search today's hits on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Good. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap. Again, Jones up the middle. Runs it back. He's to the 10 to the 5 to the end zone. Touchdown.
Today, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Get pressure again. Rolls to his right. Fakes. He's going to run with it. He's a 5. He got it.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Want to know what's happening in right now? The latest headlines are just a tap away with Fox News Talk on TuneIn. When news breaks, get up-to-the-minute coverage on developing stories from around the world. Plus, hear all the Fox shows you watch on your TV. Listen to Fox News Talk around the clock on TuneIn.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
So NVIDIA certainly capturing the attention of investors here after the close, coming out with their quarterly earnings report and a forecast. The stock trading up about 2% right now, a little less than that. We're going to break it down with Anand Srinivasan. He is here with me in the studio. But before we get to that, let's get to Doug Krisner. He's got all your headlines after the close. Hey, Doug.
Hey, in addition to the NVIDIA, we had Applied Materials after the bell giving a sales forecast that was above current estimates. It looks like maybe the slump in orders for chip-making equipment is nearing an end. AMAT shares right now better by about 3.3%. Overall, it was a mixed day for the stock market. Technically speaking, the S&P 500 extended a record with a gain of 0.1%, now an all-time closing high of 3,096. The Dow down a bit from a record high, and the S&P, or NASDAQ composite, I should say, weaker by about 0.1%. A lot of concern about not knowing where we are in the U.S.-China trade war, particularly as the market had been betting on expectations for a partial deal. Early in the day, the FT was saying the two sides are struggling to reach a Phase 1 agreement. That was very similar to what we heard yesterday from the Wall Street Journal. To put that into a little bit of context, overnight, China did remove curbs on some poultry imports from the U.S. And today, here in the States, two senior U.S. senators claimed significant progress on a Hong Kong pro-democracy bill that will certainly not to be met to the liking of, or with the liking of Chinese President Xi. Offshore Chinese currency right now gaining against the dollar by about 0.2%, 7.0196. The yen is strengthening quite a bit against the dollar here at 108.43. That gain is about 0.4%. You're caught up on markets. Back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. Well, we've been talking NVIDIA, that stock holding its gains, about 1.6% here in the aftermarket. Let's break down the numbers. Anand Srinivasan here with me for some instant analysis and insight. Senior semiconductor and hardware analyst, of course, for Bloomberg Intelligence. Hello.
Good afternoon.
All right. So what do you make of this?
Mixed takeaways. This quarter was a little bit better, driven predominantly by gaming within the data center business, which was a tad bit better than our expectations. They said that there was some mixed trends. Corporate IT was a little bit weaker, but hyperscale customers, the cloud customers, were a little bit stronger. But looking to guidance overall, that seems to be a tad bit shy. You're going into a seasonal effect with sort of a slowdown in for the next quarter from a PC gaming perspective. So you do have that mixed effect. But the broad takeaway for me is NVIDIA, in my mind, was sitting at sort of this pivot point around dramatic gaming expansion with the launch of the new Turing-based architecture, and on the data center side, dramatic acceleration of AI-based systems which need GPU-based training capability. So this is not the pivot that I want to see. If you look across the segments, gaming was down 6% year on year. Data center was down 8% year on year. Total was down 5% year on year. I would have liked to see more of a harder pivot. And it's not coming as quickly or as strongly as I had anticipated. So the Super Bowl NVIDIA, we're still holding our, we're still waiting to see.
And so when you think about NVIDIA, and I know I ask you this every quarter, but I think it's worth asking, we used to have such clear bellwethers, it feels like, in the chip industry. TI was one, probably remains one, just given the breadth of their products. Intel, from a PC perspective, how much of a bellwether is NVIDIA for us at this point? Or is it very specific?
It's very specific. Look, NVIDIA makes effectively one product, graphics processor units. The interesting thing is that the workloads that use GPUs, that benefits from GPUs, have widened out. A lot more workloads have come to see the GPU as an accelerant or an accelerator for their computing needs. The second part of it, we were talking about this earlier, which is that those computing needs have gone from being very disparate and very diversified in corporate America to being very consolidated among the clouds. So not only is it are all these problems pretty condensed and concentrated with 5 or 10 customers, a la Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, etc. Each of those workloads is a huge bottleneck, and GPUs represent a solution. But we're not seeing a dramatic pivot in use of general purpose GPUs in the data center to the degree that I thought would happen by this time.
And so as you look across, because I always like to take advantage of the fact that you're sitting in that seat to ask you about the broader chip industry, what do you see across the stocks and across the broader chip world right now?
See, one of the interesting things was Intel printed a few weeks ago. They're on a regular calendar quarter cycle, and they saw strong data center business driven by telecom carriers and the cloud, which is up 3% for them. Now, the interesting thing is Intel is the widest, biggest ice cream shop. It has every flavor conceivable, every topping conceivable. NVIDIA is a smaller ice cream shop. Our contention is in the long run, while Intel doesn't get to control all of the market share, I think it will continue to be the go-to place for the most amount of flavors, for the most amount of workloads, for the most amount of customers.
Right. Even though it's gotten out of some of those businesses, over time, especially cell phones.
Absolutely. Look, they've experimented. This is Intel's second foray into cell phone. Remember the X-Scale processor that was in the BlackBerry that was made by Intel? They got out of it, gave it to Marvell, and they got into this again through the Infineon business. So obviously this hasn't worked out well. Now they're out of that again. Intel does effectively one thing really, really well. Computing power. Pure computing, not memory, not any other associated stuff. And they're trying to make that more and more relevant to a wider variety of systems. Use the same Xeon processor in your server, in your networking engine, or your networking switch, and in your storage box. So that is helping them. Unfortunately, the gross margin expansion story for Intel is over, because they're not going to see the 62, 63, 64% gross margins again.
All right. So, important question before I let you go. How's your running going?
It's going well. I'm doing Philly in 2 weeks. We'll see how it pans out.
The Philadelphia Marathon. That's a great marathon. It's my fastest marathon I've ever run. Was in Philly. I've run it 4 times. It is a fantastic race. You're going to go fast. You're going to be great. You're well prepared. Always nice to see you. Good luck with your run. Good luck with your taper. That's the hardest part. All right. Anand Srinivasan, Senior Semiconductor and Hardware Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Just recapping NVIDIA's numbers real quick. Third quarter adjusted EPS coming in at $1.78. That was a beat. Analysts expecting $1.55. Revenue, top line coming in at $3.01 billion. The estimate there was for $2.91. The forecast saying revenue in the fourth quarter coming in at $2.95 billion, plus or minus 2%. The estimate there for $3.07 billion. The stock up about 1.75% here in the after hours. hours. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get over to Bob Moon for some world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, only a few minutes had passed since Eric McElroy had dropped off his son at school this morning in the Los Angeles suburb of Santa Clarita. He got a bad feeling, he says, seeing emergency vehicles speed past him in the opposite direction, and then a nightmare text message from his son about a fellow student.
He texted me and said that he saw him pull out a gun and start shooting, and he immediately ran with his friends the opposite direction and took shelter in a classroom.
Authorities say a 14-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl were killed, 3 others wounded, and the young suspect saved the last bullet in the .45 caliber handgun for himself, shooting himself in the head. He's in grave condition. Following yesterday's public testimony from 2 U.S. diplomats as part of the House impeachment inquiry, the nation's highest-ranking Democrat says what was said in the hearings shows evidence of bribery against the president. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, at a press conference this morning, said President Trump made a clear attempt to give himself an advantage in the 2020 election in violation of his oath of office. When asked whether an article of impeachment will be crafted around a bribery charge, this is what she said.
When the committees decide that, and they will decide what the articles are. But I am saying that what is the president has admitted to and says it's perfect, I said it's perfectly wrong. It's bribery.
And those impeachment hearings are set to resume tomorrow on Capitol Hill. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air, and TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management,